Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA war on musicians and activists study, and definitely a discussion on the system of racism and white supremacy, what it is, and how it works. And yeah, getting started. My first thought when watching this documentary based off Josh Patosh. I don't know if it's Josh Patosh or John Patosh's book, but um, it opens up with the opium wars and how Britain, white people, started a war over them wanting to be able to sell drugs to Asian people, to non-white people. And I'm like, wow, this goes back a long time. Like, it's also built into their code. Is it also built into their culture and their nature to want to, sell poison to non-white people as like a tactic of racism? Because they've been selling CIA or remnants of the CIA has been selling the drugs since 1765. And I'll mute my line to see if others want to chime in.
Yeah. The first note I had written down was the how CIA and its assets, how they use LSD and basically to sedate the youths and all the prominent institutions that were involved. Even the school I once attended, Cal Berkeley, played a prominent role in like supplying people with LSD and acid. Stanford, and how they used rock stars to promote LSD, such as the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. And I started to see a theme that the CIA and its assets, even the FBI, they are engaged in copious amounts of drug selling, and they behave like gangbangers. It's an amazing documentary. I have a lot of stuff written down, but my first tidbits is like the CIA agents, having these personas that drive around on these hippie buses and give out assets, and how they do it after riots, and they do it before riots, and they do it to control the population. And it really had me questioning my activities with the drug known as acid or LSD.
Really well said. Thanks for sharing, Mr. Sir. Like, um, yeah, very sophisticated ways of delivering drugs to the population as a definitely as a form of control and sabotage, which is definitely a pattern that I also detected that um I guess we could jump around. We didn't really have to go in order, but just the idea that the racism and white supremacy is so refined and sophisticated and hidden in plain sight that we could have this death row record label being owned and operated by basically the CIA, and they had hired cops, and someone in the documentary basically said that these cops are basically covert agents. So these people are literally telling us blatantly what's happening, and that's just really smart. And then these corporations, I mean, the CIA hides under these corporations, and then they go out and death row was the white people operating death row were peddling guns and drugs um, into black neighborhoods, and that's really terroristic, and it's really incorrect. And then they also had a huge role in the attack against the gangbangers who were trying to have truces, and like trying to just really get on a more constructive activity. But yeah, they even had George H.W. Bush. They even had him attacking Tupac and gangbangers who were trying to protect their neighborhoods and stop peddling drugs. And it just showed me how important that profitable it is for them profit drugs. And the clip with the white lady and how she says that like the stock market would crash if they stopped peddling like the amount of money they did from selling drugs to black people and non-white people. And I was like, wow, this is kind of deep. This is very deep, to say the least. I mean,
well said. So I wanted to go into the Jimi Hendrix. What happened to Mr. Hendrix? So I just wanted to, it's good to see how white supremacists operate, and how they are very intelligent. Jimi Hendrix was very unaware that the people around him were manipulating him and practicing psychological warfare against him. So what the CIA did and their assets did to Jimi Hendrix, and they killed these artists. I see that there was a trend where they kill artists to promote a certain drug. So first they ruined his reputation. They labeled him a drug addict, when in fact Jimi Hendrix wrote his best album, Free from Drugs, and hadn't even been a drug user. His manager, Mike Jeffrey, would first gave him illicit tabs of LSD without him being aware. Same thing happened to the Beatles and Rolling Stone members. Turns out that Mike Jeffrey, his manager, by the way, was a MI6 intelligence agent, and Jimi Hendrix was also a victim and a target of COINTELPRO, and counterintelligence program produced by the CIA in order to counter threats to perceived threats against white supremacy. So COINTELPRO not assassinated / murdered / killed 28 Black Panthers, and they surveillance Jimi Hendrix, had a psychological profile on Jimi Hendrix. They had it on record in a state of a national emergency. In a state of a national emergency, Jimi Hendrix was to be placed in a POW camp along with all the dangerous Negroes. And I was also unaware that Jimi Hendrix was supporting the Black Panthers and becoming more political. So in order to profit from drug sales and also get rid of a potential threat, they just had him killed. His manager, Mike Jeffrey, played a major role in having him killed. He even confessed to, I guess, one of Jimi Hendrix's best friends, who was a jazz player, that he was involved with Jimmy's death. And I remember hearing rumors when I was like a kid about how Jimi Hendrix's manager injected him with heroin and then watched him choke on his own vomit. So they'll kill you and ruin your reputation, and have the narrative be, oh, just a dead Black man who choked on his own vomit after he OD'd. Very tragic. The CIA are a very dangerous group of people. They kill anyone who gets into their way. They assassinate judges. They assassinate anyone who stops them from completing their goals. And even like historically how the CIA was started. You have these Rockefellers and these Vanderbilt people and all these Yeah, we have Cornelius Vanderbilt and Andrew Carnegie and all these J.P. Morgan. These people are all white supremacists, and the CIA is a white supremacist asset. It does not help any black person or any non-white person. It only surveillances them and figures out ways to manipulate, control, and kill them. Mute my line until I have more stuff to share.
Very, very well said, Sarah. And yes, the people who created the CIA and various eugenics programs were these four white people right here. I'm sure they all had a racist moment attached to them. But yeah, and these ties go back hundreds of years of these people manipulating various concepts called governments across the world and just reigning terror in the form of wars or drugs and just many unthinkable things, because I'm sure many of us were not aware of just how far white people who practice racism are willing to go to maintain power and control. But I see Mr. Quakus and then Miss B, they like to share.
Hello, Grand Rising. I found the section on Tupac Shakur to be very interesting. Before I get started on that, I thought that his part in particular showed how victims, VORs, victims of racism, are in a constant state of reaction to racism, white supremacy. Uh, I didn't know about his thug life persona being kind of fabricated, like him not being thug life, but I thought it was incredibly genius to come up with a persona to engage the audience, right? The gangster audience, that persona he came up with his stepfather. I thought that was genius. A lot of times today, if that was to come out, a lot of people would be upset with him, call him a fraud. But I think that his plan, his ultimate goal, was way bigger than than being an actual gangster, an actual thug. So I thought that part was very interesting. I also found it very interesting as well that his stepfather, I think his name was, let me not, I wrote it down. I don't think I wrote it down. I want to say Mbutu, but I don't think it was Mbutu. Maluku. Shakur was an acupuncturist.
Matulu.
Matulu, yeah, thank you. Matulu Shakur was an acupuncturist that treated drug addicts. So for so long, I have not known that there is an actual way to treat drug addicts other than starving them of drugs. But to think that you can actually treat them with acupuncture, that I thought that was divine, and that's something that needs to be shared immediately. If we get more victims to get into the skill of acupuncture, what we could do for our people. So I thought that was great. And kind of going back towards the end, this reminds me of how in Destruction of Black Civ, Chancellor Williams often talks about how the white people are always thinking about future generations. So we have these confirmed white supremacists, these families that invested in that British Indian company, invested in the opium wars, and they devised a way of how can we keep this advantage that we've created by drugging millions, addicting millions of non-white people, and profiting millions off this. How can we keep that advantage for years to come? How can we keep that for our future generations? And they came up with the CIA. And not only did they come up with the CIA, they also invested millions of that drug money into these Ivy League schools that every single person on the planet knows about and is somewhat trying to get to that place, sees that as the pinnacle of education, the pinnacle of society, right? These Ivy League schools, and those have all been created off of the white supremacist drug money that they got in these opium wars. I also found it very interesting how a lot of these people, those four guys that were up there, they descended from those families from the opium wars. So the CIA ultimately created and funded institutions, especially arts, to control media and the population. I had no idea about that, but I think it makes complete and total sense that the CIA was founded to keep the advantage that the white supremacists have created, and to keep many people around the world in confusion about, oh, how are these drugs coming into and affecting these populations? How are they coming into these communities? Right? I think a lot of people think that the CIA, for the most part, because they're an American agency, that have some credibility, that they're actually out, trying to do a good job and actually trying to protect America. But I think after watching this, that's not the case. I think ultimately their goal is to perpetuate white supremacy. And it's evident because one thing that I've learned about white supremacy is that with white sacrifices, those are necessary. Those are calculated business dealings that will happen in order to keep the structure and the system of white supremacy going. And that was evident throughout the documentary, as there were a lot of white musicians, a lot of, maybe white activists too, the freedom riders, for instance, who were being targeted by the CIA. And, those are white sacrifices through and through. Their ultimate goal was, oh, how can we refine and perfect this LSD drug? How can we perform these experiments in order to keep white supremacy going, in order to keep the system strong, and ultimately, achieve their goal of white supremacy forever. I'll mute my line.
Very well said. Ms. Helen, I would like to comment on what you said quickly, but go ahead, Ms. Helen.
No, you can go ahead, 05. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's very disturbing that the system of white supremacy is very, very powerful. And I'd like to read this, what's on the screen. It says, "We are facing an implacable enemy. There are no rules in such a game. We must learn to subvert, sabotage, and destroy our enemies by more clever, more sophisticated, more effective means than those used against the United States." The Doolittle Report on CIA 1981. So throughout this documentary, this is not from the documentary, but this is just something else, a little more information I've seen on CIA. But throughout the documentary, sabotage is used against entire groups and individuals, because one of the first casualties, early casualties of and victims of white supremacy in the form of the CIA was Paul Robeson, and they dosed him. They slipped him a hit of acid without him knowing, and then he ended up in the hospital receiving 53 electric shock treatments. They call it therapy, but that's not a form of therapy. And they said that he also went through depatterning, and there was the person who mentioned Laurel Canyons, where all the folks with acid, and where the secret film studio was located. I forgot what it was called, but the location was the Laurel Canyons, and also Charlie Manson and his fellow white supremacist folk, they all hung out up there. But I'm reading this book by him called Program to Kill, and that guy who was talking about Laurel Canyon, I don't know if he had wrote about it or has a book about it, but that was David McGowan. And de-patterning is something that goes into mind control and brainwashing people, and that's when you break down a person's personality and try to rebuild it from scratch. So that is a kind of torture they attempted on Paul Robeson. If that is what de-patterning means in that field, which from the text I've been reading suggests that it does. So just really, really incorrect that the origins of these institutions is based off mistreatment. These people, the four, J.D. Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt, Andrew Carnegie, and J. Pierpont Morgan, they all were heavily invested in eugenics, which is basically like racist science that perpetuated white power and non-white powerlessness and inferiority. And back to this quote on the screen, like, we are the enemy, and they have gotten very, very sophisticated and at dealing with us, at attacking us. They do have us under various forms of mind control. How else can we explain various of Black people listening to a certain type of noise called gangster rap, and then getting in cars going to shoot one another? That is a form of your entire life being under the trauma of white supremacy, and your personality being molded. But I don't want to go. I don't have to go into that all right now. But the CIA is a very, very white people in general, very effective and dangerous, as his documentary and many sources indicate. But I'll mute my line for now.
Hello, all. Like Kwaku stated, lots of white sacrifices, and I thought it was interesting that Mumi Abdul-Jabbar, that his name was mentioned quite a few times, but they didn't go into his story. I wish they would have done that. I remember reading the story about David Caruso and Wu Tang Clan, and there being a rat in the Wu Tang Clan many years ago, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. I wish I had known about or understood racism a little bit more, back then. Let me see what else. Yeah, that was really interesting when I found out about Death Row and Tupac and all that. I was like, wow, that was crazy. And I was trying to understand, like, why did they kill Cobain? Like, what was it that he was about to do what was the reason of killing him? What was the reason of killing a lot of the people? I mean, the white people, not the non-white people. I get that part, but the white people, I understood the Janis Joplin one. Didn't understand, the Cobain. And I'll mute my line for now.
If I could answer that question, I think ultimately for a number of the white people, I think they killed them because of their stance on the Vietnam War, their anti-war stance. I think that for Kurt Cobain, I think he was on a similar stance for that, anti-war. And I think it was ultimately because of his influence that he was coming into having with his music. I could be wrong though. I don't know if Kurt Cobain was around the same time of the Vietnam War. I don't think he was. I could. Someone could correct me.
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't.
Okay, then I think I would say it would largely have to do with his influence in music. I think that's probably why.
I think it may have been I think it may have been because, well, I think in the movie they state that he was going to organize some events or something that had to do with, I don't know, kind of, he's like vague and like against racism, against homophobia type stuff. But what I think it is like, I think he's like that his group like really blew up and they made him into this really like corporate entity. And I think he was really against that, like the whole corporatization of their group and their music. And I think he wanted to like disband the group and also like no longer be a corporate puppet, and was also very vocal about the way he was being mistreated by the music industry. I don't necessarily know how that correlates specifically to like the FBI and CIA, but that's just what I remember.
Yeah, just wanted to chime in a bit. So, when they murdered Jimi Hendrix, CIA, and their assets, they were doing it to like stop a potential threat and also promote, the drug known as heroin. And also Jimi Hendrix, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., John Lennon. These people were assassinated shortly after becoming anti-Vietnam War. And also the people who killed them are not regular people. They're always like some type of loony bin type character. So I want to talk about MK Ultra, like MK Ultra, which is something when you bring up, you get laughed at because people are like, "Oh, the government's not controlling my mind. They're not, making me think certain things when they actually are 24/7." So I was interested because John Lennon was a white sacrifice. So was Kurt Cobain, and basically they killed John Lennon using MK Ultra on a guy named Mark something Chaplin. I don't know how to pronounce his middle name, but in the book, Ethan Besser talks about how they used techniques involving psycho-hypnotic drugs and hypnosis to control Chaplin to kill Lennon. And what was John Lennon about to do? He was becoming anti-Vietnam War, and he was also about to lead a strike on port workers. And who was John Lennon's doorman? It turned out his doorman was the guy named Jose Joaquin San Gines Fernando, who was an active CIA agent during the Bay of the Pigs. So this guy, leaves Latin America to come work on another mission, and he gets hired not hired. He gets placed in a cover as being John Lennon's doorman, who knew John Lennon's routine, who helped have him assassinated by Chaplin. And he was also another person, he was used to push drugs like heroin and LSD. And when they were done with him, they killed him. Same thing with Kurt Cobain. I'll get into that a little bit later. But it's just really interesting seeing how many murders and assassinations the CIA are capable of doing, and they do it without any issues. Like no one is coming after the CIA for like hate crimes or crimes against their the civilians of America.
Yeah, I mean they killed the president and nobody really cared. That just shows you like how, I guess, people are accepting of what they do. And what I thought was really interesting about Jimi Hendrix is I feel like a lot of people have really taken his story or his like biography, and it's always just about him and drugs and being like a rock star. But if you actually look into a lot of like Jimi Hendrix history, like he made a lot of music with other Black artists like Isley Brothers. I think he did like a album with them or something, and he wasn't like seen as just like this Black rock star who was doing heroin. And it's so interesting that once you die, everyone else has rights to your story, so they can just say whatever. Just like how when you actually look into the Beatles, they weren't even really doing LSD. Like when I in the documentary, at least it seemed like they only did it a couple times, but maybe they were forced to make it their brand. I just thought that that was really interesting how they can just take someone's story, and it's like they always make every story the same. It's like the artist becomes a drug addict and then they just die of an overdose, but really who knows if he was even, I mean, obviously the documentary saying he wasn't even doing drugs like that.
Yeah, that's like an example of the white supremacists playing all angles and profiting from all angles, because and what I'm reminded of what we have to be very aware of is that what a pattern that we can see involving all the deaths of the people in this documentary. Jimi Hendrix, manager associated with the CIA, the doorman.
MI6.
Yeah, oh yeah, MI6, which is definitely associated and tied to the CIA. The doorman associated and with the CIA. Courtney Love associated with the CIA through her father's associate, Steve O'Leary. And so these organizations definitely infiltrate the individual or the person. And when I say benefiting from all angles, is that yeah, they promote like the drugs and they administer the drugs and profit from the drugs as well. And it's really terroristic to be driving around and giving out like thousands of tabs of acid to people who have not done psychedelics. You know, that could produce a lot of like chaos. You know, I know people who have definitely taken acid and ended up in the hospital or in handcuffs. So it's really not. So it's very terroristic. So they do this without hesitation. And I'm also learning about another CIA program called the Phoenix program, where up to 20 to 40,000 non-white people were killed and tortured and experimented on and interrogated on. And just definitely reminds me of just how this tactic is used against non-white people, especially Black people, constantly. And it's really in our faces, but we don't have the decoding abilities yet, because few of us understand racism, what it is, how it works, and what it looks like, and at all times.
Very, very well said. Speaking of programs, I wanted to talk a bit about the CIA program known as MH Chaos, started in 1967. It was a illegal, this is what they classified it as, the CIA, illegal domestic operations within the United States of America. It was a joint operation between the CIA and the FBI, and then they used local police officers to do their foot soldier work and to complete operations. One of their operations was assassinating Fred Hampton, blackmail one of the Chicago leaders at the Black Panther Party. He was killed while he was sleeping, shot multiple times while he was in the bed, And they also, after they murdered him, they put LSD in his drink, and just to have the drug on the scene, and just to get the point across that we're gonna manipulate you and kill you, and no one's gonna know what really happened to you. It'll be a dead Negro with some drugs near his body. Um, and they were really successful in dismantling the Black Panther Party. And even though the Black Panther Party were anti-drugs, but racism, white supremacy, and allowed chemical warfare to break them apart. And what I mean by that is that Huey P. Newton, another leader of the Black Panthers, he was manipulated and coerced, and literally had his mind stolen from him by the CIA, and they used Earl Anthony and Elaine Brown to get him addicted to cocaine, and they had him slowly but surely losing his mind, and all his beliefs and his code shifted and kind of retarded in a way. Like they were no longer stood for Black liberation. He was basically converted to be an enemy to his own people within the Black Panther Party. And I remember watching the Black Panther film where they show you Huey P. Newton, but the film presents it as it's his fault, But in the film, he goes from being leader of a Black Panther Party to being a crackhead, wandering the streets of South Central LA. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the Black Panther film. But yeah, just learning about the CIA's involvement on psychological and chemical warfare, and it makes sense why the Black Panthers were eliminated. The CIA is a force that they have so much money. They have not so much money. They have infinite money and infinite power, and they don't play by any rules besides the rule of racism, white supremacy, and it was my first time learning about gangs that were radicalized. You had the New York Bronx gang, the Young Lords, being converted into the Young Lords Party with the help of Fred Hampton and others. And it made me think, well, it'll be so interesting to see like all these new rappers who talk about shooting niggas in all their songs. It'd be interesting to see them become radicalized and become a threat to white supremacy versus them being agents of white supremacy by, promoting Black on Black violence, Black on Black death, non-white on non-white death, and just promoting pure chaos and insanity, and creating a population of dancing, silly, clowning Black people and non-white people. And also how the CIA, helped Black males such as Mickey Barnes become international domestic drug traffickers. I mean, Mickey Barnes he had a front page cover on New York Magazine. One of the world's biggest drug dealers, can they prove it? That was the cover of New York Magazine. And it's just insanity. It's very sad to see, but also eye-opening, so you understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people and entities that have no rules, that will kill you without question, will convince you to betray your cause and join their side, and they'll have you thinking that it was your decision. Meanwhile, you've been like coerced, like Tupac, how he was under extreme psychological warfare when he was in prison. That's what they try to get you to learn. And while you're in greater confinement, they'll target your mind and slowly try to break you. Have so much. I'm mute my line and let people continue, and I'll jump back in to get through more.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Miss B, and then Kwaku.
I'll be quick. every time I heard the term MK Ultra, for some reason I heard MLK. I don't know why. Anybody else heard something? I heard that as well. Like thought about MLK when they said MK Ultra. Um, also, uh, there was a black cop. I think it's a detective that was investigating the the Nirvana leader, his death and how he was killed. I think
Yeah.
his
Antonio
lieutenant.
Terry.
Yes, yes. That was really interesting. And let me see what else do I have in mind. Yeah, that's it for now.
I also wanted to just mention that Mickey Barnes was also a informant who was sent into the mother of Tupac. I forgot her first name, but her last name Shakur.
Afeni.
Ofini Shakur. And when she was doing all this activist work, they informed him, hey, you gotta go stop this. You gotta go, bring chaos to her life and just, so once he entered her life, her activities became more, non-constructive, and there was that whole shootout with the cops and the bank robbery. All these things started happening because this agent of white supremacy entered the picture.
Oh, also what's something that's really interesting about Afeni Shakur is that she actually figured out like who the agent was in the Black Panthers that basically set, because they had that whole setup to bomb some place, and the guy was the one who was like kept pushing it, and they were not sure about it, but eventually they ended up trying to do the actual act, and that's when she got arrested. And she actually was her own lawyer during the trial and got off, like basically by exposing the guy as an informant. It's actually a really, really interesting case. It's like, I don't know, I just thought it was like something that was just really inspiring in my opinion. But yeah.
Um, I want to talk. I think Craig, you wanted to say something. I like Craig, you speaking.
Yeah. Craig has been waiting, but yeah, just to give more insight on the Afeni Shakur, sabotage. Kenneth Leg Sonder was the CIA associate who was planted into her life to get her addicted to drugs. Mr. Quick, who would you like to share with?
Yes, thank you. One other thing I wanted to bring up that I saw that I found to be extremely interesting was the concept of social control. I guess I shouldn't say it's a concept because it's something that they actually achieved. Well, when they started with the human beings, basically a whole campaign to get rock stars, musicians to promote drug use. And I always wondered, like, when did the shift happen in music when, there was so much drug use being promoted, so much, I mean, in this case, drug use, but, sex and whatnot. And to think that that was a part of, the CIA and the influence that they had to basically promote drug use. And it takes me back to that saying, white people can show you better than I can tell you. When oftentimes we say, oh, it's all about people's environment, put them in an environment where they're constantly being bombarded with this kind of information, where you're always listening to music 24/7 that's promoting drug use, and that ultimately has an effect on somebody and ultimately influences that person. Right then and there, white people showed you better than we can tell you, because white people set it up, they executed it, and now we have generations of people addicted, maybe not addicted, but using LSD, promoting LSD, and still to this day we have musicians promoting drug use. One thing, this came towards the end of it where they started talking about ecstasy and MDMA. And that, I don't know if they really clarified whether ecstasy is also kind of like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the sequel kind of to LSD. But I do they did say that that it was kind of like some of it was used in LSD. I think it was MDA, which is a part of MDMA ecstasy, but the MDA portion of it was used in LSD. And it got me thinking about well, actually my care mate brought it up, but she said like speaking about like Mac Miller and how he recently died, like I think it was last year or 2 years ago, from a sudden overdose. And it got me thinking about a couple years ago when we had all these musicians just dying, and still to this day dying off of drug use. And I wonder how this, if the CIA might be involved in something like that, because Mac Miller was I mean, I listened to his music and I thought that I don't think he promoted like a lot of drug use in his music and stuff like that, but I could definitely see how he would be somebody that would have influence over a generation, and ultimately seeing how he could be a liability or dangerous, deemed dangerous. So I found that to be interesting.
Very, very interesting. And yeah, you bring up how they managed to get the control over the population, and that is what the CIA planned to do. I forgot the white woman's name, but she mentioned how they wanted to be able to control an individual's will, even if that meant that person's will to preserve themselves. Even that, they wanted a person to be able to put themselves in like life jeopardy, to put their life at harm to fulfill the CIA's will and objectives. And they have managed that on a massive scale. And that is because in all 9 areas of people activity, we are getting like messages that brain trash / brainwash us. And this is possibly due to corporations associated with the CIA controlling 90% of the so-called media. And how else would one explain how people classified as blacks are the only group of people who have music that promote heavy drug use and total animosity towards each other and themselves. And even some of the music promotes suicide, just to have suicidal lyrics. And is Death Row Records still like in business? If so, like that's still a so still an operating force. So is Death Row still associated with the CIA? How many other CIA fronts exist in that area? And it's very and what I mentioned about people classified as blacks being the only ones who are like producing music that has such hostility towards one another and promotes drug use. That is
wait, but I don't think that's necessarily true, because there's like this one chick that died in Mexico. I think they crashed her plane, and I think it was like her music is, there's like a whole type of genre in Mexico that makes like narco. No, it's called like Norteño or something, like banda music that's all about selling drugs and stuff. And that's actually like why she was killed. And a lot of people think that she was killed by the CIA. So I don't think it's only black people.
Well, yeah, I would say it's all non-white people. But I'm just saying, like, this is an example of racism hidden in plain sight. People just see it as just like, black culture, black music. But the racism and mind control tactics are just so powerful and so blatant. Neely Fuller talks about how the racism is in plain sight, just people just don't see it. And the whole
Yeah.
aspect of rap culture, gay banging culture, all that's together glorification is racism hidden in plain sight because people don't really look at it and say, "Oh, that's racist." Like people don't listen to a Young Thug song and say, "Oh, this is a racist song." You know, they say this is a bop or this song is lit. But I'll mute my line.
Well said. I totally agree that many black uh, rappers in today's time are controlled CIA operatives. Um, like someone just posted in the chat, lean. Like how many? It cannot be a coincidence that rappers are all talking about the same drugs, doing the same drugs, dying from the same drugs. Juice World overdosing off fentanyl. Fentanyl prices go up. People want to get fentanyl. Lil Peep dies from fentanyl. More people want to get fentanyl. Mac Miller dies from fentanyl. And then it's just, I highly suspect, after watching this documentary, I highly suspect the CIA to be a dominating force within the hip hop industry. And all of these rappers should be looked at as race traders and people who've been turned against their quote unquote people, even though I don't think they see it as their people. They just see them as opposition. Because how else could you tell? Make a song go to the studio and all your songs sound the same. It's just you killing people, having treating black women terribly. It's just really, really bad. And then there's this whole. I want to get through the entire stuff that I had take away from the documentary. So the CIA had ended up relocating Nazis to America and to South America and Latin America, just so they could continue their research. For example, I think 5,000 Nazis were sent to Argentina. Between 1,500 and 2,000 went to Brazil, and then 5,000 to 1,000 went to Chile and Bolivia, and then others went to Paraguay and Uruguay, those weird sounding countries. And they were continuing to do their work. They were continuing to kill people, continuing to research how to kill people chemically, continuing their research on drugs. For example, in 1967, you have Klaus Barbie, who was known as the Butcher of Lyon. The CIA used him to help kill Cuban revolutionary Che Guevara. And then you have authors and researchers like Herbert Johnson, who's claiming that more than 50,000 Nazis came to South America after the war, and they helped traffic cocaine from Nicaragua, and all these insane, just crazy movie type situations happening where you have Nazi soldiers being flown to America. It's very hilarious, very tragic. And then you have this 43 years of dictatorship between the Somozas and their sons. They were in power from 1936 to 1979, and this is when George Bush was leading the National Security Council. He was literally selling cocaine, and like he used his army to traffic drugs. He had his Colonel Oliver North supervise the trafficking of cocaine when they were working with when they were creating the conflict between the Contras and the Sandinistas, I believe was the other people. And so the whole Nicaragua war was all because George W. Bush and his entourage wanted to take the coca leaves and stuff that they had over there and to turn that into cocaine and to bring it over here. And with that information, it makes so much sense why crack became heavily like rampant amongst Black communities, because the CIA and its assets were like, this is where the stuff was going. It was going into Black communities. It was supposed to go to Black communities. It was always going to go to Black communities. You had Gary Webb um, talking about how the CIA was, plotting to further disrupt Black communities or urban communities or urban neighborhoods, however you want to classify where Black people live. And then there was the DEA whistleblower, Michael Levine, who reported that the CIA drug trafficked in the 1990s. They had traffic from Venezuela, and they had like tons of pure cocaine. And but the goal of this cocaine was to subvert urban American communities of crack, and these people worked with like Freeway Ricky Ross. They helped him set up a national network that grossed billions in sales. And there's so many whistleblowers like John Stockwell. He said the CIA were flying in heroin from Afghanistan, which was also known as the Golden Crest, to America. It's a lot. It's a lot of information to unpack and download. But yep. And I'll let someone else chime in before I get into Kurt Cobain and how the CIA used him. Oh yes, someone put Snowfall. Yep, that show is I haven't watched it. I did watch the a few minutes of the episode 1, and I believe that there is a scene where these two CIA agents were doing cocaine, so they're setting up the story about that. But yeah, CIA. There's no Black male that has a plane that can fly freely to these places and buy these drugs, So I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
George Bush Sr. Sold copious amounts of drugs to non-white people, brought them in the country, and his son George Bush Jr. Did the same exact thing. That's a pattern and how they practice racism. They start so-called wars and so-called conflicts to maintain control and access to sell drugs, because Afghanistan is also very has a what white people classify as a resource there, that can be used to make heroin. It's some sort of, I believe that they could be opium fields or something like that, but there's a resource there in Afghanistan that allows them to produce heroin. And I believe that there's definitely a lot of people who are being afflicted and terrorized by white people who have given them heroin or any thing of that nature. So we have 2 generations of white supremacists starting conflicts to continue selling drugs to non-white people as a form of terrorism, and as definitely a way to continue their sabotage against us. Is really horrendous realization what we're dealing with here. Go
Oh, I
ahead.
was just gonna bring up what Helen was putting in the chat. Oh, like, what did you guys think about the whole Merry Pranksters and Timothy Leary? I thought that part was probably the most like disturbing to me, especially the idea that after the Watts riots, they went in there with like acid trying to get all these Black people to just be high and basically like check out. I thought that part was probably like one of the most sickening parts to think about. Like I've always, I mean, I don't know, I just thought like the whole thing with all of the hippies and the writers and how basically they were all CIA agents is really interesting, because that was like all of these, it's just crazy to think that all of these cultural movements are literally manufactured. it makes you wonder about everything that's happening today now. Like, how much of it is really organic and how much of it is just manufactured?
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and was that a question, Ash?
Yeah.
Oh, can you repeat the question, please?
Why not? It was mostly just what were people's thoughts about like the merry pranksters and how they were going into like Watts to sell or to give away acid, and just in general the whole idea of like white people pushing psychedelics onto certain Black people. Yeah, conditioning, like Helen was saying.
I thought that part was very. I mean, just it made me want to understand like what acid. Because this has to be a different type of acid. It has to be something about military grade acid. So I'm very sure that it was making the Black people there do two things: making them accepting and like becoming in a sedative state forever. So they'll drop a tab of acid and then they'll forever change. I think that was happening. I also think some of the Black people were unable to cope with the hallucinogenic effects, so maybe they were, eventually locked away in institutions for people who suffer from mental psychosis and schizophrenia. Because I do believe that these the white individuals who were giving out coke, I'm not giving out LSD and acid, were definitely brain trashing and like mentally sabotaging the Black population. Definitely wasn't helping anyone in these neighborhoods, and especially because of the time schedule. Like it would happen after Black people would revolt, and they would, say, you know what, we're not going to be getting our. I'm not gonna let the dog bite me, and then I have to get hit by the water hose every day. I'm not gonna take this anymore. I'm a riot. I'm a loot. I'm a raid. And then they learned that this was happening, and they sent the white people, hey, give them some acid, shut them up. So that's what I think happened.
I I definitely think Timothy Leary and the various groups of organizations and white people that were giving acid to people were definitely trying to do what Sarah just described, diminish one's will to want to counter the system or react to the system. Um, it's been mentioned multiple times. It's mentioned multiple times that they wanted to use these drugs to literally control the minds of people. It wanted people to believe that that they had a so-called free will, but they were actually acting off of the will of the CIA and the system of white supremacy. So very powerful tool. It just shows the dedication because he literally went to Africa, I believe, and planned to turn like LSD loose on Africa and parts of Algeria. And I was like, he just really thought that Eldridge Cleaver was just gonna accept this acid, and just Black people are just so susceptible to drugs now that probably in 2021, probably groups would accept acid into their lives. But Black self-respect, Eldridge Cleaver did not accept the acid, and definitely saw that this was a agent of white supremacy, race soldier. Quaker, I see you have your hand up for a while now. So sorry about that.
Oh, thank you. I had my hand up regarding the Nazis. So, after listening to this, watching this, taking it in, I've watched. We all probably know this, but World War II was a complete sham. If anything, I think to the American public, we're under the impression that they were actually going over there to save the Jews, but in reality, they were going over there to save the Nazis, to go and get their people. Imagine if the American people knew that America was Nazi sympathizers. I'm sure that some people already know this, but not enough understand this. So I thought it was very interesting how they got the Nazis, and put them on government payroll. Employed them to start the MK Ultra, and then furthermore allowed many of them to flee to South America, Latin America, and basically do the same thing over there that they were using them for here, where they started to implement, where they were basically teaching groups of people out there to implement coups throughout South America, murdering what they called leftist leaders, which I just understand as people who don't want drugs in their country. And I thought that was extremely, I don't want to say interesting again, but it's just wow. Like I don't think we understand or at least me, I don't understand the gravity like of how the CIA has been using these weapons and this information against people, because they were saying with Ricky Ross or Freeway, and I put in Snowfall, and for those of you that haven't seen it, obviously it's a dramatization, but I mean the CIA is heavily involved in that show. Basically, there is a Black character who becomes a drug lord in Inglewood, I think, or Compton, basically selling drugs to his community. And then that money is going back to fund the wars in Nicaragua. So obviously there's some reality there, some real representation of history going on there, but I don't think enough people actually care about that stuff because it's happening mainly to Black people. They also do a good job of making it seem like, oh, it's the Black guy's fault. Like, oh, the Black male's fault. Like, why don't you just not sell drugs to your community? Yeah. So it kind of shows like how white supremacy will kind of put those images out there, kind of put the truth out there, and when they do, it's like almost nobody cares, nobody realizes it. And it's like it's almost too little too late. Like they make you think that stuff happened, like 40 years ago, 30 years ago. There's no way that they're doing it now, that they were caught doing it, that's all done and dusted. They're not going to be doing that. But the way white supremacy racism works is that it will refine itself, and it'll find a new way to basically to perpetuate white supremacy. And also a lot of what goes on with these wars, especially the opium war, I kind of see a lot of it. It kind of reminds me of like the war on, not the war on drugs, but the war with like the Mexican cartels and them smuggling in cocaine supposedly. Just kind of how they continuously like morph the narrative, I could say, of actually what's going on with these wars. Like, oh, we just have Mexicans coming over here trying to sell all our people drugs, but then you have that lady talking about when that New York City group, that Latin gang, when they, I guess, decide not to commit any more gang violence, but rather advocate for their communities, how that caused them to lose billions and billions of dollars because they had those gangs dealing drugs for them. And how when that happens, these hedge funds, these stocks, the Dow Jones, those stocks basically go into the ground. They don't make any more money. Also reminds me of going back to Body Keeps the Score, how child abuse is running rampant, I would consider that to be child abuse. You know, having kids sell putting kids in positions to sell drugs. I'm not saying all the people in those gangs were kids, but you know, putting them in positions to force them to sell drugs so that they can make a living and then profiting off of that. It's very telling, you know. I don't know. It seems like a lot of this stuff was compiled for interviews and whatnot, but I don't know if enough people have actually seen this stuff, because this stuff absolutely is sickening. It makes me sick. You know, I don't understand how people can have this kind of knowledge and then go on and say things about like, oh, this is a great country we live in, and stuff like that. You know.
I think that a lot of people know about this to an extent and just really don't care because they have their little material trinkets in life, and they know that they wouldn't, like, if you look at where, like, America, and you look at America and white countries basically and the rest of the world, and you see just like all of the amount of like suffering and like there's like no access to water, etc. Like at some point, I think people just come to the acceptance that these people are probably suffering because I get Amazon packages in like 2 days and I get all my trinkets. And after a while, I think people just don't care. Because like that guy that I think Sir was talking about, Oliver North, when I go to my parents' house, I see him on MSNBC getting interviewed, and he has no shame or anything about being a drug trafficker. You know, all these people are they just go right back into government or business, and nobody cares. Like, just like all the other things that are in your face, people just accept it. I think. I don't think they, just like the thing with the Nazis. I don't even think that if white people found out about that, they would even care. You know what I mean? Like, because they're just gonna be like, well, it got us where we are now, and it got me to have a house, you know, and a mountain bike that I can hang out with my kids on, you know.
Very well said, Ash. And Kweku, I really yeah, when I said earlier that it's deep, and that's why I said it was deep, because of how like beneficial it is for Black people and non-white people to be involved in drug dealing, and how much money is involved. I want to play that clip by the lady, I believe Catherine Austin Fitz. I'm gonna play her talking about it, because I'm not system of white supremacy has retarded me to a degree where I'm not able to communicate how deep it is involving the money. But white people literally benefit so much from Black people's destruction. You know, and when Black people attempt and non-white people attempt to no longer self-destruct and destroy each other, that is detrimental to the business of white supremacy severely. And this segment is gonna indicate that, I hope. And that's really tragic and terroristic, super terroristic, that our perpetual destruction and mistreatment is their profit in many areas of people activity. So I'm gonna share this portion.
One of the ways that we've financed the growth of multinational corporations and big banks and the rise of the Dow Jones is by selling narcotics to our children. It's one of the most profitable businesses in America. And towards the end, we were discussing the fact that the Department of Justice estimates that the United States is the leader in laundering organized crime profits of about $500 billion to $1 trillion a year. So I asked the audience, what would happen if we stopped being the worldwide leader in laundering $500 billion to $1 trillion a year? And they said, well, you know, if we stopped, our mutual funds would go down in price, the stock market would crash.
President Bush, the former
Stock market would crash. I think they call that a Great Depression or something, but really, really terroristic and suspected racist Catherine Fitz. Really, really.
When I had learned that, it made so much sense how there is so much drug, like, so just say there's all this war on drugs, all these drug crimes, but it seems like the drugs are getting more accessible and just more intense. I think there was I don't want to really recount the story because I don't really remember it to be I don't remember the story. But I want to talk about Kurt Cobain and how, like, Jimi Hendrix and Tupac and other entertainers and musicians, even though he was a white sacrifice, first of all, but he was also psychologically profiled by the CIA. They did something very similar to him, where they sent Courtney Love, who was a CIA asset. They sent her to, I guess I would just say, work with him, because she coerced him into taking heroin daily. Every single day she'd say, "Babe, let's go do some heroin. Let's go get high." That was her role in his life. That's why she was sent there. And then Kurt Cobain had a stomach issue that finally got cured when he was in Rome. So he wasn't even taking pain medications anymore. And when the coroners did a toxicology report, it was found in the system that he hadn't even taken drugs in a while. But for his death, they said he injected heroin and then blew his head off, which is we all know is untrue. And I think Helen mentioned it already, but the only detective who disobeyed the police supervisor's order was Antonio Terry, and he was killed for trying to find out where did the drugs come from, where did the heroin come from. He was the first cop that was murdered in Seattle in 9 years. 9 years. And then there was a witness. There was Elton El Duce Hawk. He was an acquaintance, a friend of Courtney Love, and he said that she tried to get him to blow his head off with a shotgun, shoot him in the fucking face. That's what he said. And he was interviewed on national television. He passed a polygraph test on TV, talking about Courtney Love offering to kill him. And 7 days after this footage aired, the footage that's on the screen right now, 7 days later, dead. Who killed him? Probably the CIA. And he said Courtney Love offered him $50,000 to kill Kurt Cobain. To me, it's not a lot of money to be killing nobody, but very interesting. And so the CIA did what they did. The CIA did what they did to a lot of rising musicians. That they manipulated him, much like they manipulated Tupac Shakur. And I just want to segue into Tupac Shakur, how when he was set up. But actually, I'll stop now and let someone else talk, and then I'll come back to Tupac after other people share.
Yeah, I think Courtney Love was definitely a product of the CIA. Just her whole history. Either like I suspect she could have been a handler, or maybe she had some sort of handler, or maybe a little bit of both. But just her whole background, like she was raped. It's really interesting that the narrator said that she had sex with her childhood therapist. That seems like a rape, because children and adults can't have sex, because that's rape. So she was raped at a very young age. She was housed in a juvenile detention facility, and the CIA has often used those facilities as fronts, and has often and creates those facilities across the planet to do a number of incorrect things. So she spent time in there, and then she ends up being a Japanese, I mean, a 15-year-old stripper slash prostitute for the Japanese mafia. Really, really suspicious. And then she becomes her dad becomes affiliated with Steve O'Leary, who confessed to being a CIA operative. And also his Hank Harrison, Courtney's Love's dad, wrote a book called Love Kills. And I'm like, is that like a message in that title, Love Kills? Did Courtney Love kill, or to have some indirect or direct relation cause to the death / murder of Kurt Cobain? And I think the logic says definitely, and that yeah, definitely really suspicious activities. The CIA has had its hands in everything, and it just seems to be really intelligent and genius in how it operates, because a lot of people would not suspect, you know, Jim Morrison's to be connected to the military, but his father played a huge role in getting the Vietnam War started, which was a huge benefit to the powers that be, I suspect. You know, a lot of these artists have been associated with the CIA, or have been infiltrated and brought under their control. You know, Keith Richards, or whoever the Rolling Stones guy is, got arrested with a CIA asset, and he was placed under their control. He was arrested. The CIA operative was not, and then they that seems how they controlled them. The dentist of some of the John Lennon, perhaps his dentist, CIA associated, spikes their coffee. I mean, spikes their whatever with acid unknowingly. Yeah. So all these people have military ties, and that's something very very common, and something that we really aren't aware of, because we don't research these people at all. And this is very bizarre, but the sabotage is very, very clear and real. Is there anyone would like to share some thoughts, some notes?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about like what Tupac briefly experienced, which was psychological warfare. And I believe Tupac was engaged in the race code war, or however you want to classify it as. I do believe that he was aware of racism, white supremacy. Well, I mean, I think 99% of planet Earth is aware. It's just that they've been retarded on the perception of reality is no longer accurate. So with Tupac, they used a dude named Haitian Hawk Enoch, was the informant, undercover informant that was like attached to Tupac's waist. He was the guy who was always around Tupac, it looks like. And he's the person who set Tupac up with Ayanna Jackson. And Ayanna Jackson would be the woman who would accuse Tupac of rape. And he was found not guilty on the rape charges, but he was sentenced to 4 years for touching her butt after the two of them engaged in consensual sex. So that was, to me, just the CIA showing their level of control. Even though you're not guilty, you're going to jail anyway. You're going to spend 4 years of your life in prison for touching this female's butt after having consensual sex. Doesn't even sound like doesn't that story sounds so only that story can happen to a black person. No white person anywhere is going to prison for 4 years for touching anyone's butt. I can say that right now. And also, at the same time, this is when George Bush was ending peace treaties between gangs, framing gang leaders who were participating in peace treaties, kind of undoing the work that Tupac and others have started to do, because a lot of rappers were kind of sick of tired of seeing hip hop be used to promote violence. And after Tupac was released from prison, he was already manipulated by the CIA. He was already under a new contract with Death Row. And then they used that to set up the rap war using West Coast versus East Coast. And they used cops, of course, to initiate drive-by shootings. They set up a system within the hip hop where it was cool to rap about murdering your brother, and then mistreating and disrespecting your female counterparts. And it reminds me of like today, right now. Rappers love rapping about killing each other and how many of the women they can seduce and have sex with and all these things. And really quickly, ecstasy. The key takeaways that I got from ecstasy is that it must be really strong if they were using it during the apartheid in South Africa, and how they were using it to keep Africans kind of, even though this is your land, this is your homeland, the white people are here now, and they're gonna control where you work, where you live, and what you have access to. And here's some ecstasy. Go forget about it. Go have sex and go dance in the corner. Very tragic, but very interesting to see ecstasy being used to keep the Africans in South Africa sedated. And then the last thing that I had written down that I thought was like a big shocker was that the Taliban was burning their poppy plants. They weren't wanting to engage in heroin sales in their own country. People were getting addicted. So the Taliban were getting rid of their props. And then George W. Bush said, we're going to go invade Afghanistan for two reasons. One, for 9/11, and two, because they're not destroying their poppy fields. They're growing heroin. They're causing problems. Turns out America invaded Afghanistan. They said the Taliban were terrorists, even though I do not believe that they are. I don't know what they do. It turns out that they were trying to stop people from producing poppy fields. So the U.S. invades Afghanistan, creates the Forever War, still going on today. And then the production of poppy plant production increases by 4 times. So instead of destroying the plants and stopping them from being produced, they increase by 4 times. And it just shows you how the CIA and the American government, they lie, steal, and kill like plain old thugs. They do it with impunity. So it makes it even scarier because you can't even do anything about it. Like the men in Afghanistan and the Middle East, they don't even grow above a certain age a certain height anymore because of the like genetic trauma that they've experienced. Like their DNA is saying, okay, these white people are here with these AR-15s and these M4 carbines, and they're shooting people who look 18 and 35. They're killing them, shoot on sight. And there's so many images of American soldiers and these poppy fields, these poppy plants. And now I understand why I see them, because they're regulating and making sure that these poppy fields get sent to America, because right now America is experiencing a super intense opioid epidemic, where a lot of white people are addicted to like opium and opioids, and someone has to fund this stuff. Someone has to sustain this. So this documentary made me a lot clearer on what's going on, what has been going on, and why it continues. I mean, just today I saw a video of a black male in handcuffs sitting down on the bench while this police officer who doesn't know he's being filmed is planting ecstasy pills on him, plants marijuana on him. He also plants cocaine on him. And thank God, whatever that is, that there is a video camera nearby, because they were attempting to steal this black male's entire life with all the drugs that they were planning on him. So can't trust the pigs, can't trust the CIA or the FBI. Definitely cannot trust the United States government.
Going back to the Tupac thing, when they said that Tupac was being followed by the FBI, they mentioned that in the film that he was being followed the night that he was killed. And so I'm like, okay, so that so-called the FBI was in the car right behind his. So then that means you obviously you must know who killed him. Um, and what is the guy who worked Suge Knight? Suge Knight, he said that supposedly like a couple of years ago, he said that that Tupac was killed because really Suge Knight was really the target, that some ex-wife or some ex-girlfriend or ex-wife, whatever, was really targeting him and targeting Suge Knight, and Tupac got hit. And I'm wondering now, like, okay, obviously that's not true. Or does Suge Knight really know the story? Did someone tell Suge Knight that story? Or like, where is he getting that from? Because it it seems to me obviously that it was a hit of another kind, because of Tupac wanting to bring the gangs together and stuff like that, and the CIA, FBI didn't want that to happen.
Didn't someone who worked for him too said he was with him the day of it was like his bodyguard or something, but that bodyguard also worked for the FBI, but then he decided to tell Tupac or something the truth.
Yeah, he told him not to go to the fight, not to go to the Mike Tyson fight, and he was fired soon after that, I think.
Yeah.
Kevin Hackey.
Yeah, but I suspect Tupac was on code. He understood that he was gonna end up dead or in jail, so he went to the fight anyway. And also, I suspect Tupac was aware he was gonna be murdered because he died with only a few $100,000 in his bank account, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense considering that he had starred in 6 films and had all these albums out. But then again, I understand that rap labels turn their artists into slaves, and that as a black male, it's quite easy to fumble money and lose money and spend money on silly things. But I do believe that he had already planned for his assassination.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Tupac and you're in that situation, you go to the boxing match and you can get shot, or you go home and that guy could be setting you up where you don't go and then you get shot. So I'm sure in his mind he was like, I'd rather be somewhere where there's a lot of people around, even though that ultimately didn't help.
Yeah, I'm just not aware that Tupac. I suspect Tupac was planning to continue living, and the racist woman had other plans, but I could be incorrect. But I do think his treatment is a prime example of like the CIA's and white people's assault on so-called dangerous political black rappers, because when Tupac was went sent to jail, he was subjected to penile coercion, which is just a really euphemistic way to say torture, and an attempt to subject a person to your will. And this involves various techniques, one being isolation, and we all kind of know what isolation is, and another being a monopolization of perception. And it has like a list of effects to go along that go along with the various forms of torture to inflict on a person you're trying to subject to your will, and tarnish and destroy their mind. So the monopolization of perception fixes attention upon immediate predicament, fosters introspection, eliminates stimuli competing with those controlled by capture, frustrates all action not consistent with compliance. And the variance of this is physical isolation, darkness or bright light, barren environment, restricted movement, monotonous food. Is another method of an induced debilitating exhaustion. So that weakens mental and physical ability to resist. So this is all done to Tupac while he is in prison. And there's threats, which creates anxiety and despair, and the kind of threats. And this can all be looked at also as like happening on a global scale to all non-white, especially Black people. These forms of torture, threats of death, threats of non-return, threats of endless interrogation and isolation, threats against family, vague threats, mysterious changes of treatment. And there's also another method of occasional indulgences, which provides a positive motivation for compliance, hinders adjustment to deprivation. So they even are aware that a person can adapt to horrendous circumstances. So they have this, this method in there to prevent that. And they do this by occasional favors, fluctuations of interrogation, attitudes, promises, reward for partial compliance, and by tantalizing. And another one method is demonstrating omnipotence, which is attempting to make escape and resistance futile. Suggestions suggest futility of resistance, and this is done by confrontation, pretending, cooperation, taken for granted, demonstrating complete control over a victim's fate. And the last one, degradation, which makes cost of resistance appear more damaging to self-esteem than capture. I think it says capulation reduces persons to animal-like concerns. There's a subtitle here that's reduces prisoners to animal-level concerns, and this is done by controlling a person's hygiene. You keep them filthy. You have them in infested surroundings, demeaning punishments, insults and taunts, denial of privacy. So this is what Tupac was subjected to, and this is probably how he succumbed to signing with Death Row, because he wanted to get out of prison, because this is what was happening to him in prison. And I do believe that him signing with Death Row Records allowed him to get out of prison sooner than later. Do you have any more notes, comments to share?
Something that I found was interesting was the part where I think it was the FBI basically was wiretapping MLK, and then they were basically like, you have to either you kill yourself or we put this information out. It makes me think about a lot of other people who have so-called committed suicide. Like they obviously said Gary Webb had committed suicide, even though he had died from 2 gunshot wounds, which to the head, I think. So I don't know how that works. But I just thought it was interesting too, because I remember listening to that guy, Irritated Genie, and he would always talk about how MLK was an informant and he worked with the FBI or something. And which is interesting because the Irritated Genie actually worked for the Department of Homeland Security. So it just goes to show that like they're still trying to use people to like sow confusion.
Yeah, I think the Irritated Genie also works for the Homeland Security, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I think that they basically got him there to say that, you know, because he works for Homeland Security. He works for the government.
And Miss Helen B, you mentioned Courtney Love was called a white slave. In the documentary, they mentioned that she was part of the Japanese white slave trade, where Japanese males who have lots of money, are able to buy young white girls for sex and sexual activities or comfort activities. Not sure how to classify it as, but I've heard of those things and I've seen those types of things imitated in films. But because Courtney Love was some type of government agent, it makes sense for her to have like a childhood that was very, very traumatic and highly sexualized. But they're not saying white slave as in she's a slave. It was more like they were prostitutes and escorts, and the way the Japanese market classified them, they classified them as we have white slaves for sale. So I don't think it was. I'm sure it wasn't literal.
Yeah, and I was just also checked out also up to her just her white insanity and her being a prostitute and a stripper to the Japanese mafia could also be more of an indication of her role as a CIA agent or operative, because that is one method in which the white people use to get information. They will send in racist women to be a prostitute or to be some sort of affectionate interest or have some sort of appeal to get a target to disclose information or to put the target in a vulnerable state so the white woman can steal the information. So makes total sense that she was associated with so-called powerful non-white people called the Japanese mafia. So it's very interesting that whenever a suspected racist attempted to stop slanging drugs or contributing to the perpetuation of drugs, they were either killed or imprisoned. Because there's another one, Ken Kinsey, who trafficked acid under the guise of like trip festivals or having acid parties or not. He eventually like denounced acid, and then he was met with marijuana charges. So white people have no problem eliminating each other if it does not suit their particular practice of racism, white supremacy. They definitely infiltrated many various white groups, the Students for Democratic Society, seems to have been infiltrated, and Bernadine Dorn, who I believe was associated with the Students Democratic Party and also associated with the Weather Underground /Weatherman. I believe she was dosed, or she was exposed to acid, and then that caused like a shift in those anti-war student organizations. So many white sacrifices. The Northern Alliance, an indication of like the power, the white power, the awesome power, to be able to just propped up leaders of so-called countries. And Afghanistan, they propped up Hamid Karzai and his brother, I believe Ahmed Karzai, is a CIA agent, operative, still victim of racism because he's not white. But yeah, the two so-called nations, America and Britain, built on slavery and drug peddling. It seems the opium wars started because white people wanted to dominate non-white people with drugs, and what was so correctly mentioned, described as the forever war, the conflict going on in the Middle East, that is also a war over white people wanting to control drugs and continue the peddling of drugs to non-white people, it seems, because billions upon billions, perhaps trillions of dollars are involved in this. And it's also a good mechanism of keeping non-white people in a retarded, unaware state that they are being attacked by the system of white supremacy. So drugs fulfill a lot. So it's definitely a powerful weapon that has been sophisticatedly used against non-white people, particularly Black people. Yeah, this has to be a really, the system of white supremacy is a mind control because it controls our thought, speech, and action. And until we are aware of that, we are then able to, when we become aware of that, we are able to change our thought, speech, and action. But most times people are on a frequency program to attack Black, hate Black, seek and destroy Black. And this documentary is a good indication of that. Black people is a good indication of how brilliant Black people are. Paul Robeson spoke 20 languages. I only speak one language, barely. And it just shows how they destroy just black excellence, and they have no problem doing it. And then they will just assault the so-called youth rebellion, the so-called young Black element. They will assault these groups of people who are Black, non-white people, into such a state where we just become under their mind control, just following their orders, whatever they pay a non-white victim rapper to rap about. Okay, do some lean. All right, I'll go get the lean. Go to the club. Okay, I'll go to the club until we're 40, till we're 30, till we're 50, still in the club dancing. And the program, the mind control, is very, very, very successful. Is there anyone that had any more notes to share, perhaps?
I had a question. Since I guess we're all doing like, or attempting to do like counter racist work, like what were, I guess, everyone's biggest lessons from this documentary?
Don't do drugs.
Yeah, same. Definitely has me thinking about just how drugs are used, and like how I've been like a victim of this sophisticated plan to not only be retarded by the system, but to also retard myself by consuming drugs. So a big lesson is just like to not use their weapons against myself.
Watch your drinks.
I agree. I watching this documentary, I was like, white people are driving around in vans giving black people acid. I found myself in Berkeley, California, looking for acid. So I don't know what type of program I've been indoctrinated into, but I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna move forward with the consumption of drugs if I choose to continue to do that. But it definitely made me not want to do anything. I already don't drink beer, but that's one element of the many entities that white supremacy can use to psychologically guide me to be an enemy of what I'm supposed to be trying to bring to the planet Earth, which is justice. So yeah, it definitely made me question my drug use and all the drugs I've consumed and why was I doing these things? What was I looking for? And also this documentary told me that a lot of people in the music industry are agents. They're like just fake people who've been put there. And it made me question the people that I've met in my lifetime. Like, do I have any agents like watching over my shoulder? Watching what kind of movies I'm making sure I don't step out of line. So it's very interesting, insightful, constructive documentary, and I enjoyed watching it and discussing it with the group here.
Yeah, and also how has their drugs as weapons against us, how has that been refined? And I suspect it has been through this just wave of just weed being cool and backwoods being cool and everyone just wanting to get high, every day, 24/7. And I think that is how it's been refined. They just said, hey, we can just use weed now. It went from crack to weed, and definitely, of course, weed is not as strong as crack. But if it makes a person non-constructive, then that's all that's necessary to keep racism and white supremacy going, and they're totally fine with that. So yeah, 2021, they're still using the same tactics because they work. Very effective tactics. Controlling the talking heads who are called rappers and the so-called influencers of what people are doing. If they're able to get a person in front of a screen and to promote some sort of trend and the masses does it, that has to be mind control. That has to be our thought, speech, and behavior being totally dominated and engineered by the system of white supremacy operated by a racist man, racist woman. Do you know what else? Oh, go ahead.
Weed is a gateway drug. When you ask most people, what was the first drug that they did, and they would say weed. Most people say weed. They went from weed to, and now they have a stronger stuff out there called K9 or K2. No, I think it's called K2 or something like that. And it really has people bugging out here. Like weed just made people non-productive and, just laid back and ate food, munchie, you had the munchies or whatever, and you just snack and you just sit down. Now this K2, I'm seeing people like talking to themselves and rolling on the ground and just doing some um, really odd behavior. So yeah, and also watch your drinks because a lot of the drugs are slipped into our drinks. So what I do, a suggestion, if you were to go out, put a napkin over the cup and hold it and stick your straw through it. That way, make sure that nobody could slip a drug like while you turn your head, if you're distracted. or whatever. This way you cover your drink up. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah, to answer the question, not only has it taught me to be so very wary of drugs and not to consume them, I think it's also taught me to be very wary of the people around me. I know that every time that when I first did acid, my former associate, who I've known for a very long time, but he I think would be classified as white. He introduced me to acid, and now that I think about it, I don't even know if he took it. I think I know I took it, but I didn't see him take it. And while I was tripping out, he was inside playing video games. So I don't know if he actually did it or not. It gets me thinking. The first time I did ecstasy, thank God I've only done ecstasy maybe like one, I think I've done it a total of 3 times. Very young too. I don't even know if I was in high school yet. But I saw that article about, doing 10 times and doing having permanent memory loss. But I was introduced to that by another, I would classify this person as non-white. He was Colombian. But at least I saw him do it those times. But being very wary about who's around you. If you're being introduced to people, like, where did this person come from? How do you know this person? What is the constructive, what are you hoping is a constructive result of him being in my immediate presence? Stuff like that. So I think being very wary of the people around you as well. That's one thing that this documentary has taught me.
It also reminded me of, I think Helen, you just mentioned a great tip about protecting your drinks from potential poisoning. I never had a sustainable relationship with my grandfather because a white male spiked his drink while he was stationed in Vietnam. He was some type of military man. I believe he was a medic in the Vietnam War. But before he was deployed back into America, a white male spiked his drink at a bar with military grade LSD and gave him psychosis and a lot of other mental disruptions. So when he came back to the USA, he was a totally different person. Had a lot of mental issues, and so it's a really great idea to protect your drinks. And watching the documentary, Jimi Hendrix, John Lennon, the Rolling Stone members, Mick Jagger, and other guy, they all were like drugged, So it's you gotta be vigilant out here because they have no problem attempting to ruin your life by snatching your mind. And like 0526 said, I've seen people take psychedelics and find themselves in handcuffs and in hospital beds and all sorts of things. So try to be vigilant.
Paul Robeson, also a target, and grandfather also subjected to electric shock therapy, so-called therapy. So definitely a pattern of used to attack and experiment on Black males, Black people, non-white people. Very interesting that the private investigator that Courtney Love hired to find out what happened to Cobain, Tom Grant, he concluded that she's the person who has something to do with his death. So CIA it's like a giant like multi-tentacled beast, and it just seems to be infinitely reaching. You know, they have operated in all areas of the world, from South America, so-called Latin America, all parts of Africa, all parts of the so-called Middle East, which used to be known as being North Africa, where white people have the power to change language and change the locations and names of whatever they choose. It's just the CIA for white people by white people, you know, created by four racist men who were definitely married to a racist woman, and it has become a seemingly powerful, unstoppable force. Even when they admit their wrongdoings, nothing happens. You know, nothing happens. And I'm really curious to like what were some of those movies that were produced over in Laurel Canyons. About 19,000 film projects were produced over there, but they were classified. What were the films? What messages were encoded in those films and they released into the public to further the psychological war and the mind control effort against non-white people? That's also questions that come to mind when watching this documentary and just learning about the many nefarious activities of white people. You know, introducing Tupac's mom to a known crack affiliate, sabotaging gangs, and then like for them to go for them to make just a like blatant effort to prevent gangs from politicizing and stopping the drug sales, for them to just blatantly destroy Black people and non-white people in that manner, racism in plain sight. Like we see the gang truces being sabotaged. We see gang leaders being framed. Where the white people are even using that language, framed, but no one calls it racism. You know, I saw a video interview of Tupac being 17 years old, and he said in that video, he said one of the things he hated the most was racism. And I'm like, I wonder how many 17-year-olds have that mentality now, because just the programming, the racism has been just totally ramped up. So a lot of non-white people are not even focused on white people or racism, white supremacy. They're focused on each other and show-offism and ghetto glorification and the whatnots. Another pattern I saw white people conducting is them creating like groups, like projects and programs and like organizations like the Human Ecology Center, I think it was called. And then they had MAPS, which was an acronym for something, but they all involved psychological drugs and using drugs in covert operations against Black and non-white people. And this was done throughout the globe, from Courtney Love trafficked about 1,000 hits of acid into Liverpool and areas of Los Angeles and Portland. So these are things that the average person does not have the power. Maybe not even the average white person, but a CIA associate operative like Courtney Love perhaps was totally can traffic and get away with that. Timothy Leary bringing 1,000 tabs of acid to so-called want to to set loose on Africa. Just a demonstration of how far they're willing to go and how far they go. This freaking I think his name is Leonard Pickard freaking lived in a decommissioned military silo producing 10 million hits of acid a month to be distributed across the planet. And he did it out of Kansas, you know, like him and Gordon Todd Skinner. And so the big business producing 10 million of anything is big business, especially doing it a month. So mistreating non-white people, terrorizing them, making them brainwashed slaves is big business to white people. And just furthers our destruction and retardation. Kurt Cobain took 20 years for those his suicide photos to be released. I mean, his murder photos to be released. Very suspicious. Very incorrect. Body cremated in 6 days. Courtney Love able to melt down the weapon used, probably to make some sort of jewelry or trophy out of it.
Well, it wasn't. Don't they still have some of his photos? Still in Seattle Police Department. They haven't released all of them. That's what I thought I read. That they still have some.
Possibly. But I just remember that it took 20 years for, if some of them were released, it took 20 years for that to happen. I do suspect not all of them were released. And just the whole handling of the body is very suspect. Non-white people throw away hundreds of thousands of lives to continue the drug wars, to continue the domination and control of non-white people. I really like the part with I don't remember the guy's name, but he like seemed to be like some sort of activist, and he was talking about how it's not a drug on it's not a war on drugs, it's not a war on weapons, it's not a war on terror, it's like a war on our black asses. And I'm like, yeah, he's totally correct. And the war is very, very depicted very well in this documentary. This is what a war on a group of people looks like. It looks like flooding their neighborhoods with drugs. It's dosing them with drugs to destroy their minds and destroy their will and efforts to produce a better world. It's attacking generations of a non-white black family. It's the fear that can be associated with even the possibility of a non-white person becoming constructive and doing constructive things against the system. Afeni Shakur gave birth to Tupac Shakur, both generations destroyed by the system of white supremacy. So it's tradition. This is tradition, and they refine their tradition and just can't even imagine what is a CIA front, what is a white supremacist front that is peddling illicit profits. And the CIA is involved. This just mentions drugs, but the CIA is involved in very, very nefarious activities. A lot of it involving child sexual assaults. And this documentary should show everyone that nothing is off the table. There's nothing too far. There's nothing too far. Torture, physical torture, like systematic torture, slow torture is all something they will do and do to non-white people to maintain their domination. Perhaps research MK Ultra and the many other programs the CIA has participating in and conducted. The Phoenix program, up to 40,000 non-white people tortured, disappeared. Actually, there's something I can recall from the Phoenix program. So just how deep and sophisticated this is. So there was a so-called a group of people that the CIA wanted destroyed and in Vietnam. So they set up a rumor. They spread a rumor that there was a vampire living in the hills in Vietnam, and they spread the rumors amongst the villages and amongst the their enemies, and then they tracked down and made a note of the travelings of the target. Like they took track of like their routes, and on one of the enemies patrols, they like snatched the last one who was in line, and poked 2 holes in his neck and like drained his blood and hung him from a tree by like the ankles to make it seem like a vampire had killed him. And they displayed this for like the villagers and everyone to see. And then they thought those that sort of action, that mission was successful because that enemy unit left those hills allegedly. So this is what they were doing on a grand scale that involved the deaths of up to 40,000 non-white people. That sort of like torture, them going into villages and like attempting to do it quietly, but startling a person in their sleep and having to stab them and shoot someone else in the head. All for it to turn out that they're in a different target's home. This happened quite often under the Phoenix program, the CIA activities. So they're just systematic at doing this sort of thing, and there's no limit to their imagination when it comes to destruction. Because remember, the Yurugu cannot create; they can only destroy. So their technology, their ideas, no matter how grand it may seem, it is all catered to destruction because there's no creation. It seems that these people are able to participate in no creation, nothing that is not going to involve massive death and suffering and mistreatment. But I've been blabbering on for a while. Does anyone have anything to share? Any notes?
Something that I've been thinking about is a lot of this under the context of like BLM, because a big thing about like this current crop of people in BLM is how like apparently like women are never like the face of movements, which is not true, or like are not the leaders of movements, which isn't true. But I thought it was just interesting that they say that, because if you look at like this movie, like why would the goal even be to like want to be the leader? Because obviously if you're the leader of anything, you're the first one to be used as, you know, basically either assassinated or, you know, people using drugs as a weapon against you. So I just thought that was really interesting. And the actual people who like were on the streets in Ferguson in 2014, I think almost all of them are dead now. Like all those, like a lot of them were found just like shot in a car, and then the car would burst into flames and things like that. So obviously like it just makes you think about like people who, like the weathermen, those people are like professors now, people who like were able to make successful careers after doing that type of work. It makes you wonder what kind of deals or information they gave away to protect them. That's all I was thinking about right now.
Yeah, that organization is very suspect, to say the least. I'm just going over my notes to see if I mentioned everything. 90%. I've said this already, but 90% of so-called media controlled by 6 CIA associated corporations. That is how they are able to participate in their brain washing, brain trashing efforts. They are able to produce content that has the messages of maintain white supremacy, maintain white power. Non-whites are inferior. They're the targets. Keep at the attack. Keep at the assault. They encode these messages in various music, movies, cartoon programs for all ages. If you're able to decode what you're looking at, Black people are the group of people who watch TV the most. So, which is why we are, it's one of the reasons why we are in such the state that we are in, because we have a condition to watch TV and not want to consume information such as mentioned in this documentary or read. We don't want to read either. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I guess maybe to close out this. Should we get into closing comments? Perhaps. And maybe I'll play like a clip from the film to close out.
Yeah, for my closing comment, I found this documentary of great constructive value. I urge all non-white people to stay away from drugs, especially the drugs that are being handed to you by white people. Never accept those. And from Black people, from other non-white people, definitely vet them. But ultimately, sobriety would be best, as Gus T would say. Yeah, and the CIA is white supremacy at its finest, at its greatest. As long as that institution continues to have influence over the planet, white supremacy will continue to have influence over the planet. That's it for my closing comments.
We're doing closing comments. Anyone like to share?
My closing comments. Yeah, drugs are powerful weapons, and the CIA and the FBI are white supremacists, white supremacy-based institutions, and they exist to control, manipulate, and kill non-white people. It's very unfortunate that the music industry has been infiltrated and taken over by white supremacists. And I look forward to the day where racism, white supremacy is replaced with justice. And perhaps consider saying no to drugs. Everyone listening.
I think for me, I really appreciated this documentary because I felt like it was super thorough, and he really went through like basically every example with a lot of like research and evidence. Like the text was always kind of like on the screen, so I really liked that. And for me, like something that's gonna stick with me is just the importance of always questioning, like, why is this person gaining prominence? Why is this person or this idea something that's significant in the media and in the news? And and always doing research on people, because you always find someone who has military background, and kind of like where that's going to lead you. So yeah, that's it.
Ms. B, would you like to share a closing comment?
No, I thought that the film was very informative, and no drugs and sobriety would be best. And suggestion, listen to or let's watch. Yeah, listen to GTR. He did an interview with with Mr. Patosh.
Oh yeah, he goes into the other Tupac assassination attempts on that broadcast. Would definitely recommend it. If I have closing comments,
How can I find the Tupac, the Josh Panache guest archive? How can I find
I
it?
think it's in an archive, archive 1 or 2. Just Control F and search Patosh. Should be able to find it that way.
Got it.
Yeah, for my closing comments, very interesting and terroristic, learning about what the CIA does and is doing. Yeah, just the war is really happening, and I'm just gonna play this clip. I suggest everyone watch the documentary. You can find it on Tubi TV or whatever .com, or you can email conneringRWS@gmail.com, and I'll make a copy available to you, because this is definitely constructive information. You should understand COINTELPRO, what it does and is doing, and we can only imagine how sophisticated it has gotten. I'm just gonna play this clip and then wrap it up.
We very clear. Ain't no war on drugs, no war on guns, no war on gangs. It's war on our black ass. Point blank.
War.